friend. I wanted to talk to you today about a passage of scripture that I studied with my church this morning. It's out of Luke chapter 16, and just because of the language, I'm going to go ahead and read it out of the New International Version. It's the parable of the shrewd manager. Jesus told his disciples there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So he called him in, and he asked him, "What is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you cannot be manager any longer." The manager said to himself, "What shall I do now? My master's taken away my job. I'm not strong enough to beg, and I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do, so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their houses." So he called in each one of his master's debtors, and he asked first, "How much do you owe my master?" 800 gallons of olive oil, he replied. And the manager told him, "Take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 400. Then he asked the second, "How much do you owe?" 1,000 bushels of wheat, he replied. And he told him, "Take your bill and make it 800. The master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of light. I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourself, so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwelling." I think this parable gets misinterpreted a lot of times, so I've written down some thoughts that I want to share with you today. In today's non-communal society, we can't even imagine a boss firing us and giving us time to get the books in order. But we have to remember that this was a different time and in a different place, and this steward was going to live in that area for the rest of his life, and we see his shrewdness in providing for himself. We weren't talking small debts here. This wasn't fancy stuff. This was good-sized business in that day and age. I don't think that we can consider this master or this manager to be saved. They weren't working for anything but themselves, and we see that, a lot of the times in our society where people are bent on greed. And Jesus doesn't ever give any indication that this is how we're supposed to act, but it is an example of the values and activities of a sinful culture. I think we see that today, where we see the evil men who will convict other evil men of wrongdoing, and they're doing the same thing, if not worse behavior. But many who are Christians today would pride themselves on their ability to get ahead. None of us perhaps are rich, but we can be sneaky towards God and our fellow men. God doesn't ever commend us for walking the ethical gray line. Jesus never commends the actions of the individuals in the parable. He does expect his people to recognize the world that we live in for what it is. It's real interesting to me that God uses this same term, shrewd, when he talks about Satan in the Garden of Eden. A pendulum will swing from extreme to extreme, and it's useful for us to understand where we're at culturally as Christians. On the far side of the pendulum swing is the unrighteous steward who thought nothing of being unethical to accomplish things for himself. As this pendulum swings back to the center, we find the debtors who were in their greedy relief to get out of debt were prepared to be his accomplices. Further towards the middle, we find that master, and he wasn't shown as doing anything wrong, but he thought that the steward's actions were commendable. He probably would have done the same thing himself. And then right there in the center, we find the place where we do have some commonality as God's people towards these individuals, and that is that we should have a different attitude, but Jesus advocates that we should use our material possessions to influence people and to influence people for the kingdom. The Christian, and particularly God's local, visible New Testament church, should use physical things to influence other people for the glory of our Master. It's in this principle that we don't find any foul in using marketing techniques for our church. It's in this spirit that we give Thanksgiving baskets for the poor in our community, and we unashamedly tell them that the church put it together for it. It is shameful when we hold the resources that God has entrusted to our care in our wallets and our bank accounts without it being used to accomplish commission work. And we fall into the steward side of the pendulum when we do not use what God has given to us. This side of the pendulum was best characterized by the use of the term unfaithful. Now, over in 1 Timothy, Paul talked to Timothy about the subject of money and material possessions. He talks about how that contentment is great gain. He talks about how the love of money is the in whatever form it takes, is the root of evil. And whatever God gives us, we have to be found faithful. I really like the way that a dear friend of mine has recently expressed this. He said, God owns all of the resources in the world that are needed to spread the message of the gospel of the kingdom. The problem is that most of that remains in the back pockets of the kingdom people. And in this, we're guilty of mismanagement. So as we move across the pendulum of properly dealing with our resources, we have to understand that we have to be found faithful. We have to understand the reason why we have material things, and that's so that we can use them for God's honor and for His glory. I hope you've enjoyed this passage today. We'll see you the next time.